Of young and enthusiastic people, as well as the wisdom and knowledge of the old people, is equally recognized. Uh, Keeping this in mind, the today's first session will be handled by a very young and dynamic person, Mr. Pinak Kulkarni. I will now invite Mr. Balayar, who is going to preside over this technical session as a chairman, to come forward. I will also invite Anand Kemboi to formally welcome Balayar. Mr. Balayar, please. I will request today's speaker, Pinak Kulkarni, to come forward. And take his seat. I'll request Mr. Balayar to welcome Pinak. Now it's all yours, Bala and Pinak. Thank you.
Respected Vice President West, Mr. L.P. Patel, Chairman Pune Branch, Mr. Lagate, Past Chairman Pune Branch, Mr. Joshi and Mr. Kembavi, the speaker for this session, Mr. Kulkarni, ladies and gentlemen. To begin with, I compliment the Pune Branch for organizing this event, which is a great service to the fraternity of materials and supply chain management in the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no industry today which does not face competition. And to be ahead in the race, every function in the company has to be innovative and do creative things which competition does not do. We all know when two industries or two companies in one industry compete, the competition is mainly amongst the supply chain functions of both these companies. As the company whose supply chain management creates a good value for the customer gets more business than the other competitor in the same industry. While every industry wants to grow, every industry wants to grow not only India but overseas, there are certain limitations that we face doing our day in and day out jobs. The limitations could be, one, in terms of infrastructure in the country. The constraint could be learned people, experts in supply chain in the industry. It could be the tools that we have at our disposal to do our functions. It could be many, many things. A company that can overcome the limitations can find innovative ways, can find creative ways of trying to use whatever is at its disposal, ultimately becomes the winner. We have with us Pinak Kulkarni, who's going to talk about this subject in detail. I would request Mr. Pinak to come over and handle the subject. Thank you.
Thanks, Bala. That's okay. It doesn't matter. Hi, good morning. I'm going to take it from Bala actually. Bala used 2 or 3 keywords. He said the competition is not between organizations, it's between the supply chains of organizations. He said we need to compete, we need to beat competition. And he said we need the right infrastructure. He said we need the right people. So what we'll do is, we'll look at what creates limitations. So what are the current practices that we have, which by the virtue of being what they are, lead to limitations for us. Keeping it consistent as a framework, we'll try and look at configuration of a supply chain, design of a supply chain, in other words. We'll look at the processes, we'll look at the people aspect of supply chain, and we'll end it up with the technology aspect. So basically what we are trying to do in the next 30-35 minutes is to get a perspective of configuration, people, process, and technology, practices and limitations in supply chain, or what creates those. Our first limitation begins with our understanding of the topic called supply chain itself, and the common views which we in the industry seem to share. And actually they have evolved over bullet point 1, 2, and 3. Is we started with supply chain equal to logistics. Then we said, okay, there is a supply chain, and this supply chain has multiple functions. So there is a procurement function, there is a logistics function, there's a finance function, and then there is a supply chain function. This view exists in the industry today also. The most advanced organizations seem to have bullet point 3 as their perspective towards supply chain, which apparently seems to be an holistic perspective of looking at supply chain. So basically you are trying to tie up your customer's customer with your vendor's vendor. We'll not spend much time here because these are all views. Traditional approach, which we all have actually practiced, that the sales guy wants a product, so the production fellow does everything but delivers that product. In turn, the procurement fellow goes and purchases it. We have come across all sorts of things that the sales guy wanted 100 units and the procurement guy ended up buying 1,000 units simply because everyone wanted to create a buffer. So basically what has happened is, if you look at the customer end to the supplier end, we have actually had a cannibalizing effect which cascaded itself to create what in jargons is called as bullwhip effect. Reason being, at a practice level, we don't seem to have a view which is tying the entire supply chain to an entity who drives us, which is the customer. I mean, we are all trying to respond to a random event called sales. I mean, all of us can raise our hands whenever we think that sales is not random. Sales is necessarily a random event. No guarantee that someone who walks into a Tata Motors shop will buy a red color Tata Indica or a silver color Tata Indica. There are various means and ways by which people make decisions. And we in supply chain create a structure to respond to that event. And while doing that, because we have subordinated ourselves to the rest of the functions, a sales and distribution guy is subordinated to the ultimate aim, which is the customer. Whereas the rest of the organization, we are subordinated to the rest of the functions. So the logistics fellow wants to dispatch a full truck load, necessarily means the production takes up a large batch because he needs a full truck load. This has been the traditional approach. In jargons, this is called as maximizing the local rather than optimizing the global. The global objective is very simple. We want to make money and we want to make more tomorrow. I mean, any organization under the sun wants to make money. And there are only two goals, I mean, to be honest. One goal is to increase revenue and the other is to increase profits. We in supply chain necessarily have to contribute to that if we belong to an organization. And if we belong to an organization, compartmentalization necessarily leads to increased local performance. So I in procurement will get a reward for buying material at the least possible cost, whereas I in distribution gets rewarded for having the least distribution cost as a percentage of COGS. And all along the chain, the profits did not increase. God knows why did they not increase. But the limitation seems to be a focus on local rather than global. If we have a perspective, and that's very clear to us, let's look at how supply chains get designed. At the end of the day, the configuration of your supply chain, the way we design ourselves to respond to demand, is necessarily going to drive the operational aspects of a supply chain. I mean, if I have a wrong structure, it's very likely that I'm going to have wrong things happening in my supply chain. What I've put together is a very simplistic view of trying to figure out how my supply chain should actually get designed. We are all product/service oriented organizations. We have products which are either functional in nature or innovative in nature. Functional necessarily means easy substitution, where my margins are very less. Quote unquote, they are commoditized products. For such products, if my supply chain is not an efficient supply chain, then I basically am going to have a challenge of mismatch. So I need an efficient supply chain if my products are functionally oriented products. For innovative product, which is basically a new product which comes to the market, a product which is like Apple launching an iPad, for example, necessarily needs responsive supply chains. The configuration of supply chain is a basic limitation in practice because we don't seem to have a worldview of looking at which kind of industry do I belong to, which kind of products am I creating and supplying, and have I created a supply chain network to meet that. So the type of supply chain mapped against the type of the product is basically how the design of supply chain should happen. If you don't have it appropriate, then actually we are asking for trouble. I mean, just to give you an example, if I'm in FMCG, my margins are pretty thin. I mean, how many of us really buy a Hammam versus a Liril versus take any other product? If it is available on the shelf, do we really have a conscious choice between certain products? I mean, I'll just not take care of people like peers. I mean, they have a different need. But typically when people buy soaps, when people buy routine things like kurkures of the world, when people buy, I mean, I personally belong to the breed which says that I actually don't have a differentiation for buying a Santro versus a Maruti versus maybe a, what other car I should say, maybe a Volkswagen Polo. Dependent on that, my supply chain has to be designed. And a mismatch in design necessarily means you're asking for more trouble. From a strategic view, which is the configuration view, we now come to the process view of supply chains. My configuration being correct or wrong, whichever way it is actually, I come down to processes. And what we are going to do is we are going to borrow it straight from the SCORE model for us to only categorize the processes in supply chain. Typically, supply chains have 5 processes: plan, source, make, deliver, and return. We basically all belong to this breed of supply chain, so maybe I don't need to even explain the terms in detail. We all appreciate what is plan, we all appreciate what is make. So what I'll do is I'll just jump on to a very critical challenge in supply chain, in the process perspective. This particular graph is trying to indicate the time lag in the supply chain when the customer demanded a product versus my production taking it up for producing. You substitute production with supply side, does not matter actually. That time lag is the basic challenge today in our supply chains. And that's where this topic called demand-driven supply chains, which tries to compress the time between the generation of the demand and the supply of the product for that demand. So my challenge today is I have extremely poor on-time and in-full deliveries. I mean, all of us being practitioners appreciate how we calculate our performances, but honestly speaking, from a customer perspective, when he wanted the product, did he get the product? Defining how will I deliver? I mean, you'll hear about that in when you hear about KPIs, but at this stage, what we just need to understand is, how do I define my performance measure is in the context of what the customer wants it to be. It's very convenient for me to say, customer gave me an order, I committed 30 days and I delivered in 30 days, so my on time and in full is perfect. Customer wanted it in 7 days. That's the difference. And that's the key challenge that we have. We have increased our inventory. I mean, the balance sheets of most of the organizations show that they have increased inventory. And we have longer lead time for fulfillment in comparison to what the customer is ready to wait for to get his demand fulfilled. These are the 3 mother challenges.